Good afternoon, my friends. Hi, how are you? Welcome to the second module of our, a very exciting module of our, second session. So we're going to be talking about pre-Islamic Arabia, and I want to deconstruct some images that you have of pre-Islamic Arabia, right? We know that Arabia is a land of mostly deserts, right? But this is not the case with all of Arabia, right? Not all Arabs were having a Bedouin way of life, of roaming the desert in search of habitable oases. They did not all live in tents. They were not in Yemen, they were engaged in agriculture. In Mesopotamia and Syria, they were engaged in agriculture. They had, of course, urban centers, and we will get to them. Some of the Arabs were traders, and trade, in fact, was a major sort of vocation of the city dwellers, the Arab city dwellers, as well as the nomadic Arabs. And we'll get to all of this gradually. The Arabs, as we talked about before, yeah, if you imagine the map of Western Asia that I talked about to you, there were two major empires, right? The Sasanians on the east, the Byzantines or Eastern Romans on the west, and the Arabs were totally integrated on some level into this sort of uh, culture of Western Arabia, so to speak. They were affected by different cultures, and we will see how they came to affect different cultures, right? We had Christian kingdoms of the Ghassanids in Syria and Lakhmids in Mesopotamia, that Mesopotamia that we will get into, right? So who were the Arabs really? Yeah? We first hear of the Arabs in the Assyrian inscriptions, right, around 800 BCE, where we are told that the Arabu, right, came riding camels, right, circa 800 BCE. Now, why? How come the desert is so good for how come the desert is so sort of well, let's put it this way, how come the camels are so fit for the deserts, right? The camels basically functions as Porsches of Arabia. They could travel long distances in inhospitable and dry regions. They needed much less water than your regular beast of burden. They could carry as much as 300 pounds. Um, I mean, you cannot read my lips, my friends, but they could carry as much as 300 pounds, and 300 pounds, and they needed less water doing that, right? They could drink up 30 gallons in one sitting, and they could use that water little by little, right, during their journeys. They were perfect beasts of burden for the great desert. They also, of course, gave the Arabs a fighting advantage, right? Sitting on the camels, so tall, right? Unless you're dealing with elephants of the Indians to deal to to sort of fight with them. Sitting on camels gave you sort of advantage over all other, over sitting on horses, so to speak, right? So there was the desert, right? But there was the zone and there was the city as well, right? So how are we going to conceive this Arabia, therefore, right? Herodotus, the Greek historian who was writing in the 6th century BCE, right? In Athens, right? They knew, the Greeks already knew Arabia, but they knew what part of Arabia. They knew Arabia Felix, which is this part of Arabia, which is the Yemeni part of Arabia. It was called Felix because, as Herodotus says, yeah, Arabia is the last of inhabitant lands towards the south, and it is the only country which produces frankincense, myrrh, cassia, cinnamon, and laudanum. Right? These are different spices and different frankincense and whatnot that was used by the ancient world quite often for the smell and for what was thought to be the the cleansing effects of frankincense and whatnot. So they knew Arabia Felix, they knew Yemen, they called it Arabia Felix, Happy Arabia, because it was a lush region. It was, it was a settled community. It was a civilization it had a major civilization, right? And that went to basically, around 500 BCE as well, right? And as you can see, it was on the southwest. Yemen, right, is on the southwest corner of the Arabian Peninsula, right? This being the Arabian Peninsula, but it was not just Yemen, right? It was not just Yemen that was very, very lush and conducive to agriculture. This area that we call the Fertile Crescent, because it's shaped like the Fertile Crescent, right? On the one hand, it's fed by Tigris and Euphrates to the west, Tigris to the east. So let me write it down for you properly. Let me take that out. Okay, so here we are dealing with Euphrates plus Tigris. And if you think about Iran as the center of the world, because your faculty is Iranian, right? Then you say that ET is going to Iran. ET. I don't know whether you remember ET or not, but it was, your parents must know about it. It was this movie that came out with this creature that was very sensitive and had all the emotions, but it was kind of, it was a creature. So anyway, so Euphrates, meaning that Euphrates comes first. This is Euphrates, and Tigris is to the east, right? This is Tigris, and this is Euphrates, right? So now this because of this, of course, the Mesopotamia was very rich. It had an ancient culture that went to 3000 BCE. It was one of the river valley civilizations, as you know. But it was not just Mesopotamia that was lush. In Syria also cultivation was possible. Why was in Syria cultivation possible? Because we have two series of mountains here in Syria. One is called Mount Lebanon, and the other one Anti-Lebanon, right? Mount Anti-Lebanon. Okay, these two mountains, right, face the Mediterranean Sea, as you can see right here, the Mediterranean Sea here, right? They face the Mediterranean Sea. So from the Mediterranean Sea, right, humidity gets sort of accumulated, becomes rain, and hits these mountains, right? Just to show you a little bit, yeah. So it hits Okay. Well, it is, yeah, it, let's see. Okay. It hits these mountains, becomes rain, and falls on the side that is facing. The rain falls on the side of the land facing the river, right? But it also becomes, goes to the top of the mountains where it will come as rivulets here. So this becomes the fertile crescent, and of course from here you have the Nile River Valley. So you see, you have the Tigris and Euphrates, you have the Mount Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon, that creates what we call Mount um, I'm sorry, no, it creates what we call rain shadow effects, right? Rain shadow effects. So, in other words, it makes this area to the north of the Arabian Peninsula very rich, and this area is one of the areas in which we have the most ancient settlements of the world to begin with, right? Because it was one of the, one of the excellent areas to settle in, right? So that and therefore you have three civilizational sort of nodes, if you will, in Yemen, in Mesopotamia, Yemen, and of course Syria. Right? Three nodes, three civilizational nodes, three urban nodes, sort of surrounding what is the in the center of it, right? I.e., the desert of Arabian Peninsula, the desert portions of the Arabian Peninsula, right? So not all of Arabia was desert, and in which the camels were beasts of burden, but we had settlements, of course, and we had civilizational nodes all over the Arabian Peninsula. So you would think that most Arabs are Bedouins and just roaming the desert and not involved in agriculture or trade for that matter, both of which are wrong. So we knew that agriculture does take place in the three nodes that I mentioned to you, and of course Arabia was a major sort of crossroad of trade between Mesopotamia, between the Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, right to the west, and of course Egypt, which at this point was part of the Byzantine Empire, right, during this period. But as you can see, as early as 500 BCE, we have, I mean, this is not when the trade started, but this is when a sophisticated trade network was started by the Arab Nabatean kingdom that ruled this area, right? This area of Syria, right, from 500 BCE, ultimately to 100 CE. The Nabateans were an Arab kingdom, Arab tribe that first appeared in the 6th century, and they were located, quote unquote, in the desert, right, east of Jordan. You see, this is Jordan, here is Jordan, right? And so they settled here, and at first they had their capital at Petra, and we will get to that. But as you can see, the Nabateans had a sophisticated network of trade, and this is the network of trade that remains through the period that we are talking about, i.e., from 500 CE onwards as well. So where does this trade go? As you can see, there is one that goes from Yemen to Syria, straight line, right? And there is also a sort of navigable trade area in the Red Sea, right? So with ships as well as through land, right, from Yemen to Syria, then you see that this here that you can see is Yathrib, and we're going to get to that. Uh, Later becomes Medina and becomes one of the cities of Prophet Muhammad, right? This is Yathrib, a little above, north of Yathrib, you see the Khaybar, right? You see Khaybar here, and you can see from basically Medina, you could trade, you could send caravans, right, to this part of the Gulf region, right, to where is around United Arab Emirates and whatnot, right? And you could send it to what is now Babylonia, what was then Babylonia, and later on becomes Ctesiphon, the Ctesiphon, the the capital of the Sasanian Empire, right? So from Yemen, you could go to Ctesiphon, or you could go to the eastern ports of Arabia, right? And including it is not on the thing here, but this is somewhere around here is Basra, the port of Basra, and we'll talk about that later. So you see that the trade engagements of the Arabs, right, were quite sophisticated. Their networks was quite sort of went all over Arabia and basically connected the civilizational centers to each other. You have Egypt, um, Eastern Roman Empire, right? Egypt, Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, which had control of Egypt, right? And the Sasanian Empire. The beginnings of this trade, as we are talking about it now, right, goes back to actually these Nabatean people, right? So these Nabateans, as you can see, they also had, as a result, yeah, they had important cities created. One is, for instance, the city of Petra, which is right here, and Palmyra, which is right here, right? These were also two important cities of the Nabatean kingdoms, and these were, you see, sophisticated cities in the Syrian, Greater Syria area, so to speak, right? So you see, this is you see here, you see the trade routes once again. These are the later trade routes, right? And these are the spices that were carried, and these were the major cities to which, right, all these goods from especially from Yemen was sort of exported to, right? It was not just Petra and Palmyra, but well, it was also Damascus, right? And various other late antique cities, ancient cities, right? Ancient cities. We are now talking about, say, 500 CE. Now we are getting to 500 CE. We have Yemen, right? We have Damascus, right? We have Ctesiphon, right? These are major urban cities, urban centers, circa 500 CE, my friends, right? So, but that is not all, right? That is not all. So we're still talking about the settled Arabia, right? Settled Arabia. Well, in the settled area, Arabia, right? You look at this, you see that here on the right hand corner of your map, you have the Sasanian Empire, right? And you have you see that you have the Lakhmids here and the Ghassanids here, right? Lakhmids, the kingdom of the Lakhmids and the kingdom of the Ghassanids, right? These are both Christian Arab sort of satellite states, right? Uh, the Lakhmids were the satellite of the Sasanian Empire, right? Lakhmids with the Sasanian, right? And the Ghassanids with the Byzantines. These were the satellite cities, settled cities, sophisticated cities, right, of Lakhmids and the Ghassanids. The capital of the Lakhmids, you see, was here at Hira, and as we will see later on, through Hira, the Lakhmids, well, we are seeing it now, that from Hira, the Lakhmids took control of Inner Arabia for the Sasanian and the nomadic tribes of Inner Arabia, nomadic tribes of Inner Arabia, right? And you see where Hira is located, and of course here again you see your Ghassanid Empire, which is connected to the Byzantines, right? So here you have two superpowers for which the Arabs, in which the Arabs play a significant role, right? Both the Lakhmids and the Ghassanids are in charge of taking care of the tribes of Inner Arabia for the Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, right? So the kingdom of the Ghassanids, you see, was basically in Syria, in Jordan, right? And my friends, please learn your geography. I'm sure by now you have learned your geography. You know where Syria is, you know where Jordan is, you know that Iraq is in Mesopotamia now, right here, right? And you know that Lebanon and Israel and Egypt are where they are on your maps, right? And the kingdom of the Ghassanids, you see, was almost also Christian Arab satellite of the Byzantines, right? And it sometimes happened that the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids just fought in each other, and then they brought the Byzantines and the Sasanians into the picture as a result of their own fighting, right? So here it's the way we see it, right? You have the Persian Empire here, you have the Byzantine Empire here, you have Syria, which has become predominantly Christian, and this is wrong. You have Jerusalem, which at this point is also predominantly Christian, right? Because the Byzantines because the Byzantines, unlike the Sasanians, really persecuted the Jews, and basically uh, when Constantine the Great converted to Christianity in the 300s, right? Then, and Christianity began to grow. It became quite, actually, it became quite um, sort of belligerent, so to speak, right? Especially towards the Jews. I mean, Roman Empire was already quite prejudiced towards the Jews, unlike the Parthian and Sasanian Empire later on, right? Medina is correct, was a predominantly Jewish city, right? This is a predominantly Christian city, Jerusalem now, and of course it is correct that the Yemenis had become predominantly Jewish, right? And they were always in loggerheads with the Axumites, were also predominantly Christian, but of a different Christian sectarian group than the Byzantines, right, who were Monophysites. And the Axumites were basically Deophysites. Monophysites believed that the two personage of Christ, the divine and the human, are have come together in order to make the person of Christ. And the Deophysite, so monophysite and Deophysite, right? Mono one, Deo two, and Dio two. And Diophysites, they believed that, or Deophysites believed that no, Christ had one corporeal corporeal dimension and one divine dimension, and both of them existed separately in his person, right? So to speak. So this is the picture of the um, of the regions and of the empires, right? Two great empires, and Yemen, another. It was not an empire, but it was a great civilization, right? And then you have the Lakhmids, you have the Ghassanis. These are our players, right? Lakhmids, Ghassanids, the Yemenis, the Ethiopians, right? The kingdom of Aksum, which was very, very important for trade, and of course Yemen, and of course Mesopotamia. Here you see that and this is Tigris, if you look at it very closely, and here you see Euphrates written. This is Euphrates, I-E-E-T, going to the center of the empire, Sasanian Empire, right? So this is the situation circa say 500s, right? Circa 500s, right? So the Yemeni kingdom, which is called the Himyarite kingdom, right, converts to Judaism circa 500, right, and begins to persecute its Christian subjects, right. In 525, Ethiopians come and conquer the Jewish Yemenites, right? And they remain there for a while until the Jewish inhabitants of Yemen ask for the aid of the Sasanians, right? And the Sasanians come and invade Yemen in 570 CE, right? 570 CE. So by 570s, right? This is the way things are, right? There is still still have the Lachmids, right? You still have the Ghassanids, but by 570s you have the Sasanians in Yemen uh, to help the Yemenis Jewish population against the satellite kingdom of Aksum of Ethiopia, who, though was from a different branch of Christianity, nevertheless was functioned as a satellite of the Syrians. Now, what is important here? You have to see that there are three important, four important waterways, right, that are surrounding what you call, quote unquote, the Middle East, what we call Western Asia, right? We are not calling it Middle East, but we are calling it Western Asia, right? So, I hope you're with me through all of this. So, you're dealing with two empires and two smaller sort of very powerful states, right? The Yemen and the Ethiopians, right? And you have the Lachmids and the Ghassanids. So to think of Arabia as Bedouin Arabia and nomadic Arabia and desert Arabia, right, is quite wrong. To think about Western Asia as a desert Western Asia, of course, is even more wrong, right? Because there are two different river valley civilizations that are developed here, right? Because you can see that Egypt, while it is simultaneously part of inner Africa, as well as connected to Western Asia, right? So this is the situation here. We are circa 570, right? And the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire have been, in in contest. I mean, if you will, the West, right, has been the West, but this is not the West. It, as you can see, it is as much East as the Persian Empire is East, right? And the East, the West, so to speak, quote unquote, and the East are constantly in war with each other. Byzantines are constantly in war with the Sasanians and vice versa, right? Over what? Over what I believe to be trade and trade routes. The same trade routes that we talked about and we saw before, right? So, and we are now here going out of the lush and civilizational sort of parts of Western Asia, right, and Arab kingdoms in general, and now we will be looking um, uh, into Bedouin pre-Islamic Arabia, right? Into Bedouin pre-Islamic Arabia. So who was living in in Arabia? Well, you will say, well, Arabs. But yes, I mean, to you have to keep in mind that this term of Arab, Arab ethnicity as such, not Arab ethnicity, but the self-identification of Arab, some argue was created later on because the settled Arabs, right, because the settled Arabs only called the inner Arabia Arabs Arab, right? Arab meaning someone who comes and goes back and forth, right? They themselves did not call themselves Arabs, right? Which is very interesting, right? But they called the Bedouin Arabs Arabs, right? So Inner Arabia was made of various tribal groups, right? Various tribal groups, and you can see it on the map here, my friends, right? These maps are, you know, that you have the tribe of Tamim, for instance. You have the tribe of Tai. You have the tribe of Kal. I don't need you to know all of this. You have the tribe of Kinda. You have the tribe of Hawazin, right? You can see here is the tribe of Quraysh that we will get into, right? Very, very soon. And we will see that the Quraysh are around Mecca, right? So tribal Arabia, right, nomadic Arabia, the beasts of burden of which are the camels, nevertheless were functioning as traders, right? Nomadic Arabs were functioning as traders um, uh, in Inner Arabia through the routes that we talked about, taking the goods of these parts of the world, right, to and fro to each other, right? And that is how Arabia became the middleman of trade in Inner Arabia. But of course, not all of Inner Arabia was desert, right? There were small pockets of lush, sort of small regions that were called oases, right? This is the plural, singular is oasis, right? And they basically were these kinds of places, a body of water around which there is you know there's possibility of agriculture and settlement, and as we will see, Yasreb, which later becomes Medina, right, is an oasis city, right? So even in Inner Arabia, you had settlements of various tribes around these kinds of oases, right? So now I keep talking about a tribe, but what is a tribe, right? The people of Arabia, Inner Arabia, organize themselves socially and to some extent politically as a tribe. So what is a tribe? A tribe is, first of all, you have a number of families, right? Families, right? These families come together and make a clan, one clan or the other, right? These clans come together and make a tribe. And we will see in the genealogy of the prophet how this works actually, right? And we will see what is a clan and what is a tribe. But this is in general the way a tribe is formed, right? So this is the tribal roots, right? Trade routes of Arabia, right? You see, they come from Yemen, right? They go through Mecca, right? Ostensibly, then they go through Medina, right? Then they go to they could go to one of the ports, right? And Luca Come, for instance, and go through the uh, Red Sea, Mer Rouge, right, to Egypt, right, or basically coming to the Sinai Peninsula, which is this part here, and going into Egypt, right? That's one way that they would get to the north, right? And or they would get to Syria, Petra, Basra, Damascus, right? Or they would get to Mesopotamia. Basra is a later name for what used to be at this time called Charax or Ubula. Port city of Basra, and another port city of Gerha, right? So two port cities, and then of course where Tigris and Euphrates come together, here has always been the capital cities of Babylonia, of Mesopotamia, be it Babylon, okay? Just give me a second, my friend, right? So these capital cities where Tigris and Euphrates come together, you start with Babylon first, and then you get Ctesiphon during the Sasanian period, and then during the later is quote unquote Islamic centuries, you get Baghdad. All located the same place where Tigris and Euphrates come closer together, a very, very sort of fantastic sort of place to settle. But of course, if you know anything about the history of ancient Mesopotamia, you know also that unlike the Nile, which was a very calm, at most times was very calm, but had sometimes had sort of tumultuous river became a tumultuous river. Tigris and Euphrates were most often tumultuous, right? And it is from here that you have all your stories of floods that we have from ancient Mesopotamia that comes into, say, the Old Testament and becomes the flood of the flood that is about to destroy Noah, right? And his family, where he actually builds the ark and saves the family and whatnot. This story of the flood in the Old Testament actually comes from the actual floods that took place in Mesopotamia and that are reflected in ancient texts of Mesopotamia, right? Such as the text of Gilgamesh, which I really sort of plead with you to read, because it is a very, very fascinating sort of novel, right? And it's so close to the Old Testament that you will be surprised, right? So these are the trade routes that Arabs are using, right? Circa, say, 500 to 570, right? So now, but so this is 570, right? And you have to mark that date, right? Because it's an important date, because it is the date that we are told the Prophet Muhammad was born, right? The narrative of Islamic origins says that the Prophet Muhammad was born in 570 CE in the city of Mecca, which is down here, and this is Yathrib, which later becomes Medina, my friends. Mecca. This is Mecca, right? So 570, Prophet Muhammad is born in Mecca, and we are told that he dies in 632, right? Now, okay, but what is happening during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad? This is from 570 to 632. You should take notes, my friends, right? Or or you will watch this video again, right? In order to recollect the information, right? So you see Banu Lahm, Banu Ghassan, Medina, right? And we are dealing with the period from 570 to 632. We will go over all of this that I'm telling you later again. But just for the sake of, just for your information, right? This is the life of Prophet Muhammad. From 570, for the first 40 years of his life, i.e. to 610, we know very little of Prophet Muhammad, right? We know that he was orphaned at a young age. We know that once he was in his 20s, say by 590s, right, he starts going from Mecca to Syria for trade, Mecca to Syria for trade, right? And we know that at 610 he receives the first revelation from God, right? Telling him that he is now a prophet, right? Prophet of God, and that he should start preaching, right? But from 570 to 610, basically, therefore, Prophet Muhammad, right? 510 to say, let's say 622. Why 622? We will see in a little while. From 570 to 622, Prophet Muhammad is supposed to be going from Mecca to Medina as a tradesman, right? We will talk about this later. But what happens in 570, the time that Prophet Muhammad is born, is that during the same time the Sasanians, right? The Sasanians come, and through the sea, because the Jewish population of Yemen have asked them to, they come and conquer Yemen, right? So in 570 already, right? In 570 already, Sasanians are in Yemen. And we know, of course, that Sasanians, right? We remember the major sort of territories that Sasanians had under their control, and Mesopotamia was one of them, right? So now, besides Iran, Sasanian have Mesopotamia, and they have Yemen, right? So, so it is at this point in 570s we are told that a prophet is born, right? So here you have, just look at your map, my friends. You see that there are mountains here. That's why to this area we say Hijaz, right? Which means barrier. You see that your Mecca and Medina are to the east of these barriers, right? You see that one of the major straits, Bab al-Mandab, is here. Another major strait, Strait of Hormuz, is here. You know that already the Achaemenids have made the Suez Canal here, right? Well, which was not called Suez Canal, of course. The Suez Canal that we are talking about belongs to the real established, I mean, the real construction of a major canal in this area after the Achaemenids, which we remember went from 550 to 330 BCE, right? And the modern canal was built by the British and the French at the height of their colonialism, right, in the 1800s, meaning 19th century. You're with me, I hope, my friends, right? So this is a very, very important region of the world, right? Of course, you knew that already. Western Asia is a very major um, area of the world, and in late antiquity was actually the center of the world, with the Byzantine and the Sasanians and the Arabs and the Yemenis and the Ethiopians all working together, along with the Lakhmids and the Ghassanids. Yes, my friends, right? So this is the tribal society of Mecca, right? So now, we are told that in this society, Prophet Muhammad is born in Mecca in 570 CE, that his father is Abdullah, his mother is Amina, right? And that he was orphaned at a young age, and that he was raised by his uncle Abd al-Muttalib, who also led caravans to Syria. The Prophet Muhammad is supposed to have been, the tradition tell us, that the Prophet Muhammad was so trustworthy in the Meccan society, right, that while he was orphaned in a younger age and he was raised by his uncle Abdul Muttalib, right, he was so trustworthy that the wealthy woman of Mecca, who is also a trader by the name of Khadija, asks the hand of Prophet Muhammad in marriage, right? And Prophet Muhammad marries her, like, say, in his 30s or something. As I said, we don't know exactly when, because we don't know much about the first 40 years of Prophet's life, i.e. until 610. What is 610? At age 40, Prophet Muhammad is sort of praying. He used to go in sort of for meditation in solitude in a cave that was there, what it was at the at, close to Mecca, right? And in one of these occasions, the angel Gabriel comes to him, right? This is this is more a rendition of it. Where do I have it? Okay, I don't really have it here, but this is the rendering of it. An angel comes to Prophet Muhammad while he is in a cave in the mountain of Hira near Mecca, right? And tells him that lo and behold, God wants you to be his prophet, his last prophet, the seal of the prophets, right? Seal of the prophets according to the Islamic tradition, right? Seal of the prophets, and you have to begin to preach, right? So at age 40, at 610 in Mecca, right, Prophet Muhammad begins preaching what we are told is the uh, first tenets of Islam and the first verses of the holy book of the Muslims, namely the Quran, right? So the Prophet Muhammad is born, right? Um, so he starts preaching. Prophet Muhammad starts preaching. This is the story of how trustworthy and smart he was, that when they wanted to put the black stone, which was a sacred stone, and this is pre-Islamic, onto the Kaaba, which is the structure that you see in Mecca, in which they say 360 idols were located during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad, right? And they wanted to put a sacred black stone there, and they, different tribes were vying for who is going to put that stone onto the Kaaba, which is basically means a cubicle, right? And Prophet Muhammad comes up with this idea that he would take a piece of cloth, and he would put the stone in the middle of the cloud, and the tribal sheikhs, i.e. tribal leaders, would take the various corners of it, and they would take it onto the Kaaba, and they would install it into the Kaaba uh, as a sacred stone. Now, at this point, of course, during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad, we are told that Kaaba has all these idols, right? 360 idols, where during certain months of the year, right, all the tribes come, and these idols belong to different tribes, and through certain months of the year where tribal warfares and petty warfares are not allowed, they would gather in Mecca, and they would circumambulate the Kaaba, i.e. that means they would go around the Kaaba, right? Circumambulate, right? Circumambulate around the Kaaba, and and at the same time, right? They would engage in in oh, I'm sorry. Okay, they would engage in trade. So Mecca, a sacred city for pre-Islamic Arabs, and one in which they came and they engaged in trade, right? So in this kind of a situation where you have, all these tribal idols in Mecca, and you have the story goes, right? The Islamic narrative goes that you have a lot of sort of warfare taking place. You have a sort of a society that is becoming very wealthy as a result of this trade. Meccan society is becoming wealthy. There are created various classes, lower strata of the population and upper strata of the population, which, as usual, right, as is usually the case in various societies, they sort of abuse the lower classes of population. Inequities uh, are are great there, right? And then here comes Prophet Muhammad, and through the angel Gabriel, here he is ostensibly told that all men are created equal, right? Um, and um, and then therefore um, the initially all the people that came to be his followers, right, are coming from the lower strata of the population, right? But originally the first two people that came to convert to the Prophet Muhammad is Khadija, his wife, right? And Ali, who is his son-in-law and son-in-law as well as cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, right? Ali, son-in-law and cousin, and we will see how he is a cousin of the um, of the Prophet, because he is the son of Abdul Muttalib, right? I'm sorry, the son of um, Abu Talib, and uncle of the Prophet, right? An uncle of the Prophet. Um, So I will stop here, my friends, because I don't want this to go too over time, and I will continue on a different on a different sort of lecture, and the rest of the lectures for this module. I hope you are so far with me, my friends. Until a short while, I bid you goodbye.